Hello, welcome to the Citrus Garden. If you're new here, my name is Christina. If you're not new here, hi, welcome back. It's great to see you. This is a pick a card reading for the time frame ahead, however long this reading lasts for. Usually for these pick a card readings, I pick an overall theme with the cards. So we're gonna go through that right now before going into the individual groups. So the first two cards that came out here, we have the Prayer and the Storm, which is such an interesting combination, right? Because the Storm kind of comes in with this energy of like the Tower. So it could be that, but it kind of just feels like something that's like an external factor, right? Like the weather that we have absolutely no control over. So something external that we have no control over. And it's kind of like something that you just have to wait out. And be patient a bit with this energy while it sort of goes through. The thing about storms though, always when I see lightning, I think of how lightning through an act of like destruction can free up more resources or materials that are actually necessary for growth. So it's kind of like there's an energy here where it's like perhaps an external environment or external factor is perhaps causing like destruction, I want to say, of some sort that actually frees up more resources. And it's kind of like in the meantime there's this prayer energy happening, which to me is always kind of like asking the universe for something or asking for guidance. Or it kind of talks about the lines that were sticking out to me from the guidebook were like, how can you be of service? Because it's kind of like there's something about surrendering to an energy that's higher than yourself, right? Like that's sort of what's coming through with the prayer. So it's kind of like, I feel like there's this energy here with the storm that is perhaps very humbling, right? Like you need to like sort of wait it out, like find some sort of shelter to sort of keep you safe while this external energy passes through. That's really interesting. But then in the meantime, we have this Mask card that was coming out underneath the prayer. And this Mask card is so interesting because it talks to me about like kind of like superheroes, how when they put on a mask, right, it hides their identity, their true, or like their regular identity, let's say. But at the same time, it allows a different aspect of their identity to come through, right? Like, and again with the prayer is like, because it was coming through as like, how can you be of service? So whatever it is that this storm energy is, it's like perhaps there's something that's like you can't move from a place, or it's like there's an energy of like having to like hunker down while this energy passes through. And it's like in the meantime, there's some other aspect of your identity perhaps that wants to come through with the mask, that perhaps is not something that you can see yourself doing in like your regular environment, right? It's like it's something that's like, I don't want to use the word hidden because that comes in with too much like baggage, but it's kind of feeling like it's just a different aspect of your identity that wants to be explored. I'm just going to leave it like that. And then what's so interesting is that you have here the Stone card, and then I pulled one of these as well, and the Stones card came out. So you have the Stone twice, which talks about like something that's very long-standing. So it could, but the Stone card came out underneath the storm, right? So the stone is something that can absolutely withstand the storm. So there's that kind of aspect. There could also be something like that's really interesting, because now I'm kind of getting like, whenever I see this kind of symbol, it reminds me of Harry Potter, the Deathly Hallows, like the three like magical objects that were sort of like all powerful, right? They had the invisibility cloak, the wand, and the resurrection stone, which is really interesting that's coming out. And of course Harry Potter was known for this sort of lightning scar on his forehead. That's really interesting. What is that about? Because it's kind of something like the invisibility cloak was something that Harry Potter inherited as a child, which is really interesting. So there's kind of like perhaps whatever this, and that's with the mask, something that's hidden or allows you to travel in secret. That's really interesting. Invisibility cloak, what is that about? It could be something like whatever the storm is, it's requiring you to perhaps move in secret, or like if you were under a cloak of invisibility, right? Like whatever this storm energy is, and it's kind of something like in that story in Harry Potter, he's always had the invisibility cloak, but he didn't realize it was one of these like very three powerful mystical like objects that were almost like legendary, right? Like he didn't realize that was something that he had in his possession since he was a child, basically. So there could be something there about like this storm is actually revealing something about your identity that you've had for perhaps a very long time, but didn't realize that it was something that was like a very long-standing, perhaps like artifact or gift or whatever that is. And with the prayer, it's like it has something to do with service, or what you can provide to others as a service, or and like perhaps has something to do with like answering prayers, but I don't know if that, I don't know. We'll see if that comes out in a different group. But anyway, so that's the overall theme. I'm going to go into the individual groups. I'll hold up cards, and the timestamps are in the description box below. All right, here are the cards for the groups. I'm only doing 2 groups today. I was going to do 3, but I just ran out of time. I have other stuff I have to get to later on. So for group 1, we have the Judge, and for group 2, we have the Faultline. So you can find the timestamps in the description box below. Hi group 1, welcome to your reading. So we're going to start with the bottom of the deck energy. So we have here the Healer and the Judge, which I love so much. This Judge energy comes through with like making distinctions between right and wrong, which is, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, as with all things, but there's kind of like this energy, now that I'm saying that out loud, there may be sort of like shadow work that's being done in this time frame, especially with the Healer card, right? Like healing aspects of the shadow. Especially with the other cards that are coming out. And I feel like part of what else was coming through here was kind of like things that are in black and white versus in color, right? So there's kind of something here about like introducing more color perhaps brings more variety into a certain experience, whatever that is, right? Like, but there is also like this sort of things perhaps being more clear when there are like 2 sides, if that makes sense. Because all things are very complex, right? All things are very complex. Sometimes the truth is very simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy or that it's complete. if that makes sense. It's kind of like playing with this idea of truth with the Judge here and complexity, which is interesting. I'm just going to leave it like that. And then here at the bottom of the deck for this card, for this deck, we have the 2 of lotuses, which is the cups, and then the 4 and 5 of lotuses. So just visually, right? Because I'm seeing this as being sort of like, this is the storm energy, right? From the overall theme, where it's like there's something coming in that perhaps is going to disrupt some sort of like stable relationships, maybe, because that's how I see this 2 of cups. Like your most intimate relationships, right? There's kind of an energy that could potentially disrupt something that's been very long-standing in your relationships, for example. So just keep that in mind. I have no idea how that's going to play out, but the first card that we have here is the Apocalypsis energy, which is specifically talking about like the veil of deception is being removed. So if there has been any sort of deception within a dynamic, it's like that's being removed. And then you also have here the veil card in this deck, which is so interesting to me. This is the Star card, right, in this deck. So it's talking about healing. Sorry, the scene, okay, it's gonna be very Harry Potter themed today. I don't I don't know why. Maybe it's just the season. The energy of the cards is just bringing in a lot of like magic and spookiness. But here with the veil, I'm kind of like thinking about that scene in the 6th book. If I'm just gonna, it's been a while, so I'm spoiling it if you haven't read it, in the 6th book, where it's like, we were talking about the invisibility cloak in the first part of the reading. So it's, that cloak is not only allows the wearer to be invisible, but it also protects against enchantments, right? Like any sort of enchantment sent to the wearer would be protected from that, right? Which is really interesting. So it's kind of feeling like maybe that's going to be, there's kind of like a vulnerability here that's coming through. Maybe like there's like the veil of deception, in quotation marks, right, is being removed of some sort, but it causes this sort of like vulnerability that comes through, because it's like now the truth is out there. There's no sort of protection from other people witnessing you or that kind of thing, which is really interesting, because the other cards that we have here are this, like the tunnels and the 8 of lotuses. So this 8 of lotuses is kind of like this is like sort of being protected by that invisibility cloak, right? There's kind of like this like going in deep, because all of these cards, the first 3 tarot cards that you have out here are like pretty dark in terms of just like the color, right? So being sort of in the shadows is kind of how I'm seeing this, because the spirit plane is all of that, right? It's kind of like waiting. It's all of this is coming through with like a waiting in the shadows, right? Until, or like in the tunnel, until, I don't know, something is being revealed, or something can be spoken about, or there's like some sort of energy here that is revealing something that has been hidden, right? So it is coming through with a lot of truth energy. And then we have here the animal and the air card, which is really fascinating, because going from the tunnels, right? If you just think about like the air in a tunnel versus this sort of energy, which is kind of like bringing in like fresh air, or like things coming up to the surface perhaps, or being like aired out, right? Like maybe it's like dirty laundry or something that's being aired out, something like that. And then you have here the animal, which is really interesting because this card talks about sort of like our physical bodies, right? The animal aspect of ourselves. So it's coming in with like the strength card, but specifically focused on the animal aspect. So not the logical thinking mind. It's like things that are purely physical. And it's so it was coming through with this story. I wrote this like novel like years ago now, but there was one part of that story where there was like a shapeshifter character, like he could change shape. And when he was in a specific form, right? Like if he was in his human form, like he had certain privileges, of course, but then like he got stabbed by whatever. He got stabbed by this sort of venom energy, which is the next card out. And the only way that he could heal that was by turning into his animal form, right? That's sort of the story that's coming through here. Which means like, I feel like whatever it is that's happening, right? There's some sort of veil of deception being removed. And in the process, it's revealing the truth about some sort of venom energy, perhaps, that's been present in your environment in some way. But because you have the healer card out at the bottom of the deck, it's talking about healing this aspect. And perhaps it has to do with like leaning more on sort of like the natural, perhaps like primitive, quote unquote, animal aspect of self, rather than sort of the logical thinking, human rationality kind of method of fixing things, maybe, right? So it's kind of something like that. Or it could also be something like if there's been any sort of dysregulation in terms of this energy with the animal, because this also talks to me about like fight or flight, right? Like having really reactive responses to potential threats in the environment as well. Especially if there's something like a storm energy, right? It's like this card can sometimes come through as being sort of like a fight or flight, feeling caged in, right? But I feel like whatever this process is, it's revealing some sort of truth about perhaps a venom in your environment. And I was trying to get more clarity on what this could be, and it was coming through with encounters, which is fascinating. So again, because it's coming through with here, the Two of Cups at the bottom of the deck, there may be some sort of truth being revealed about your relationships in some way, where it's kind of showing like perhaps venom energy that may be present in our relationships, right? Which is extremely tough to go through. But it could also be because the encounter sometimes talks to me about strangers, right? It's like suddenly, it's like every time you meet somebody new, it's like you can see something about their patterns or their perhaps addictions or something like that might be kind of alarming, or right? It's like suddenly this veil. And I feel like veils are not a bad thing, right? Like something should be private and hidden, but it's almost like this veil is being removed and it's revealing all of this sort of tricky energies, which is really interesting because the next cards that are coming out here. So you have the Ace of Trees and the Elementalist. So these are really positive energies. The Elementalist in this deck is the King of Swords. So that's coming through with clarity, right? It's like this Ace of Trees I always see as being sort of like a new project that you're trying to grow, right? Like a new seed, a new beginning. That's very physical and tangible in this sort of physical realm. So it's kind of like there's perhaps you're trying to build something or grow something with the Elementalist, because that also talks about sort of like in order to create something, you have to also be masterful at breaking things down or taking things apart, right? It's like I don't want to use the word destroy because it's so harsh. I don't want to use, it's not something that's harsh, but it's like if you're building something, you have to first cut up the materials, right? You have to destroy, quote unquote, the base materials in order to construct it into something new. So there's something about that which is interesting because it's feeling like it's focused on relationships. So it's like you're trying to create perhaps a very strong foundation for a new relationship maybe, but in the process it's like breaking down other relationships in your life, not necessarily like ending them or burning bridges or anything like that. It just more feels like through clarity, right? Like through being able to see or understand human nature, which of course involves animal nature as well. That's really interesting. And through this process, there's also kind of like this energy. You have the Five of Birds and the Orbs. This Five of Birds is one of the more difficult cards in this deck, which talks about like conflict. But today, because it's coming out under the Venom card, it's kind of like in Spider-Man. In Spider-Man, so much superhero imagery coming in as well, where it's kind of like Venom is like the shadow aspect of Spider-Man, right? It's like Spider-Man has all the abilities of Spider-Man, but is contaminated by a venom, right? So it's like perhaps having to do shadow work, right? But it's also coming through this story from like the Star Wars episode, like the animated TV version, where Yoda, in order to reach a higher level of consciousness, Yoda has to fight his shadow, right? But it's like at the beginning of that episode, there was kind of like this energy of like he was like, I'm a masterful Jedi, like I've already done this work, right? So you may be feeling that like I've already done all of this shadow work, but it's kind of like this is kind of like the next level of consciousness. In order to get to that next level, there's still perhaps some energy of like having to integrate the shadow. And the message that came through with that episode was like, if you ignore the shadow, right, it actually gives it more power. And so the way in which we work with this energy is to acknowledge it, but also not allow it to control our actions, our thoughts, all of that. And so that it could be something like that. So this Venom energy could be very much an internal process, right? It might not be, but again, we like relationships, part of their wonderfulness is that it reflects aspects of ourselves that we perhaps can't see, right? So relationships are mirrors, absolutely. So there's kind of like this energy of like perhaps seeing some sort of Venom energy in somebody else also reflects back to you something about yourself that maybe you can't see, right? Or that perhaps you're not willing to see, or that is difficult to see, or that we don't want to acknowledge, because it's kind of like we did all this work already, right? We did all this shadow work. We've done all the healing. But anyways, you also have here the Orbs, which is the Strength card in this deck, which I love so much, because it's coming through that episode again with from Clone Wars of the Yoda episode, where it's kind of like this is the Force energy, the universe coming in to support you, right, in order to reach this next level of consciousness, which I feel like is a desire that most spiritual people have, is the Strength card, being able to master sort of like the lion aspect of self, or the animal aspect of self, that not in a way to like ignore it, right? Not in a way to ignore it or to neglect it in any way, but to integrate it and honor it and allow it to express is kind of what's coming through here. Okay, group 1. That's really interesting. I'm gonna leave the reading there. If this resonated with you, please subscribe, like, or leave a comment down below. If you're interested in a personal reading, you can find my website in the description box. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye. Hi group 2, welcome to your reading. So we're gonna get started with the bottom of the deck energy, which we have here the Faultline and the Anima Mundi card. So this Faultline card talks about like something cracking open, something breaking open, something like the image that came through from the guidebook was like being on ice that's cracking. So it could be that there's something coming through where it's like there's a precarious situation perhaps, or it's like there's change coming. Absolutely, there's change coming. It's kind of like, but it starts off as like a small crack or like a small fissure or something like that. That's the overall context though. I feel like it's like you're already aware of this, or like this is being drawn to your attention now with the Anima Mundi. It's like it's best to acknowledge this and work with it rather than ignore that it's there, right? So it kind of feels like there's something like that that's coming through for you. And then we have here the life on earth and the shapeshifter, which is really interesting. So group 1, the reading for group 1 might be relevant to you as well if you haven't watched it already, because I mentioned the shapeshifter and the life on earth, which is the world card, right? That in this world there's absolutely this kind of like, so it could be like there's shadow work happening, especially because you have the shaman out. But it kind of feels like there's like something is shifting. I feel like if there's been some sort of tricky situation, it feels kind of like a past energy that's coming to an end, right? Like all of these sort of like this is the world card. So it's talking about completion, right? A completion of a particular cycle. So that's the overall energy. The first card, which is really interesting, that's coming out as the vow, because normally I like this card a lot, but and it's also coming out with the peacemaker and the 5 of trees. And so this 5 of trees is the 5 of pentacles, but it talks to me about like an environment that's not fruitful, right? And because of all the Harry Potter energy that's coming in today, there's so much. It's like this reading is basically all just Harry Potter stories. It's like the scene of when Harry goes to this Quidditch match, like the world final or whatever it's called of Quidditch, and then at the like sort of there's just a disruption where the Death Eaters come and it's like this chaos energy. That's what this card is coming through as. And with the peacemaker and the vow is kind of coming through as being sort of like, I feel like your energy is the peacemaker, right? It's like perhaps like trying to bring peace to a situation that was like chaos or a lot of shadowy energies, perhaps, that kind of thing. Like this is an environmental factor, perhaps that's what that's feeling like. And it's like you were here as the peacemaker, trying to bring peace to a situation that doesn't have peace. But with the fault line, it's like I feel like this is cracking, and because it's coming through with the vow as well. Normally I see this as a positive card, but it was kind of coming through with an energy of like maybe you made like a promise to somebody or a situation, because it kind of talks about like contracts or like messy karma, which is what's coming through here, right? Like perhaps like you got involved in a situation that maybe you shouldn't have, or it's like there's perhaps like messy karma that you're cleaning up is kind of how this is feeling. Whether or not that's yours or not, I have no idea, but it's kind of like you're in it. Regardless of whether or not this was yours, it's kind of like it's yours now because you got involved in it, is kind of how it's coming through, right? Like it, which is kind of just like, maybe that you made an unconscious sort of vow to, I don't know, manifest something or get involved in something that perhaps wasn't like fully realized until you actually got into the situation and something changed or something was revealed to you or whatever. But it's kind of like, because you made this vow, you kind of have to stick it through until the end. But I feel like there is that, like, it's like that's what's shifting, especially with the fault line. There's change coming. I feel I'm and it's kind of like this reading is trying to prepare you for it with the shapeshifter, because it's kind of like you're going to be shifting forms. You're going to be shifting forms in order to leave this situation. Perhaps it's like you're finding a new place to go to, or it's like you're making a new vow, or it's like through your commitment to yourself and like your own emotional stability. Perhaps it's like you're being removed from this messy karmic environment, maybe. Okay, because you also have this Venus card, which is another 5, so both of these are 5s, right? Because I'm noticing here like a lot of like the Roman numerals for some reason. It's like that, because I don't know, I feel like, so a lot of change perhaps. And again, there's another 5. The next tarot card out is the Phoenix, right? Rising from the ashes. It's like through this sort of through this whatever, this ashy kind of like, the land is not fertile. It's like it's been, or it's in the process of going through a really massive transformation. It's like you are rising as the Phoenix, right? This is the Hierophant card in this deck, which is so interesting to me. Is those two images don't necessarily go together in my mind, the Hierophant and the Phoenix. But it's kind of like, because now I'm getting that scene in Harry Potter where it's like Harry first witnesses the Phoenix go through its burning day, right? So it could be that there's something in your that's very stable, right? The Hierophant is Taurus energy, so something that's very stable or very long-standing or very traditional, right? It could be institution related, but it doesn't have to be, is going through a burning day, is kind of how it's feeling, right? It's like the death and transformation, the death and rebirth kind of energy. And perhaps you who's watching this, group 2, you made sort of an unconscious perhaps promise to witness this transformation in some way, or it's like you're in this space, right? You've attended some sort of event maybe, and all of this change is happening. I feel like this is unexpected and not your energy. This is the external thing. Something is happening to perhaps somebody else, or some other thing, some other energy, some other structure or institution is going through a really massive transformation. And it's kind of like, it's like the only thing you can do is sort of sit and wait it out, is kind of how it's feeling to me. Because there's but the good news is that it's kind of like, here you have the shaman and the tear, right? Because it's kind of like that scene with in Harry Potter where it was like when he was witnessing the Phoenix go through its burning day, it was sad. There was a lot of sadness, because normally the Phoenix is so majestic, right? And it's also coming through is like the Phoenix has, in that story, the Phoenix has the ability, like Phoenix tears are very healing, a very healing substance, right? They're like one of the only cures to the basilisk venom, which is really interesting. I feel like this is absolutely tied to group 1. But anyways, so the shaman is coming through as being sort of like a healing energy, right? Like restoring something to its full potential in order to gain some sort of healing or completeness is what's coming through, because but it kind of feels like there may be a separation, is kind of how it's feeling, right? It's like being separated from, or like not seeing something at its full potential, but seeing it at its sort of burning day, right? Like when it's going through transformation, it's not at its best, or it's not at its full majestic potential, but there is still healing that happens within this energy. I have no idea what I'm describing here. It's just like these are the images that are coming through. And then with the shaman, which is really interesting because the dice came out next, and so it's kind of like I was seeing this hand today as almost like throwing dice, right? It's kind of like there's this moment of like when you're playing like a board game, right? You know, in like movies and stuff, when they show kids or something playing a board game, it's like they roll the dice and then it kind of goes in slow motion. That's what I'm seeing here. But it's also kind of like there's kind of like this energy of like divination present, of like rolling bones, right? Like the divination bones, or like rolling the dice to see what the next move should be, or how many steps ahead you can take, because the next card out is the Pathfinder, which is kind of like a ready, set, go. It's kind of like this moment of like the dice have been thrown. You just have to wait and see how they land, is kind of how that's coming through, in order to determine the next steps forward, whatever that is for you. And I feel like, but I feel like for you, group 2, whatever this change that's happening is, it's gonna work out in your favor, is kind of how it's coming through, because you're this sort of peacemaker energy, right? The King of Cups, because you have here next the 1 card, which again, I'm noticing the X's for some reason, right? Like 3 X's make an O, or like this, because you have the 1 card, right? And then you have the Ascendant, which is also a 1. There's a lot of number synchronicities in your reading today. So a lot of 5s, which is transformation, but going into unity, which is this 1 energy. So it's like kind of like, even though, so it's kind of feeling to me like coming full circle, a completion, a wholeness, right? Because whenever I see the shaman, I see this as being sort of like retrieving fragments of oneself, right? Like in order to become whole, in order to become like healed and integrated. And with the Ascendant, it's kind of feeling like this is how you show up in the world. Like I feel like it has to do with like there's so much here that I can't like fully pull it in with the 1 card. It's kind of like feeling like, okay, I'm just gonna leave it there. And I'm just like noticing the X pattern again everywhere. Okay, it could be something like X marks the spot, right? Like some sort of like arrival energy with the Ascendant card, because this talks about like how, like the rising sign, right? How you interact with the world and how the world interacts with you. So there could be something about that here with the Ascendant. And then to end off the reading, you have 3 major arcana. You have the Death card, the Pelican, and the Bridge, which is so fascinating, where it's kind of like, so the Death card in this deck is the Fool, right? The new beginning. It's like you have the 1 and the 0, which is so interesting to me, because I got this like download a couple days ago. I had no idea what it was about, but it was talking about like binary code, right? Like 1s and 0s, where it's kind of like those are the only 2 numbers you need in order to make up every number possible, because it's just a pattern of 1s and O's, right? 1s and 0s. So it's kind of feeling like simplicity, like going back to a more simple kind of energy, maybe, or like a binary kind of, which is interesting because this is the opposite. This is not a binary energy. This is about oneness, of wholeness, of completeness, not binary. Anyways, okay, I don't know. I'm gonna move on. And then we have here the Pelican, which is the Emperor in this deck, but this one comes through always with the message of like karmic debts are being cleared. Like you've cleared the debts of whatever this karmic situation is, and that's what's allowing you to start again, is kind of how that's feeling. And then with the Bridge card, because this is the Moon, but it's kind of like in this transformational process, right? It's kind of like with that sort of dice energy or it's like a mirage, because this kind of comes through with the energy of like a mirage or an illusion. Like up ahead you're seeing some sort of illusion or image or whatever that actually reveals something that you really want, or that like you really want like to happen, because it's kind of like in the moment when the dice are rolling, right? It's like you know what it is that you want, and it's kind of like or it's like if you're forced to choose between one option or the other, it's kind of and perhaps there's a state of indecision of like which option do I pick, where do I go, what's the right option or choice for me, right? And it's kind of like you have to make a decision in a split second moment when the dice are rolling before they land. And it's almost like once they land, you can tell what it is that you desired by your reaction to the outcome, is kind of how it's coming through, right? It's kind of like you wanted option one, but then if option two is given to you, there's like a disappointment feeling, right? Or it's like if you're given option one and it's like, well, what about option two? But are you, I don't know, there's something here about decision making perhaps, but I don't know if you're actually making a decision, because it's kind of like the dice have already been thrown. It's really not up to you, maybe, because maybe it's something like you've already made some sort of vow, perhaps unconsciously, but now it's kind of like waiting for the dice to land to see how it is that they are going to land. I feel like though it is going to be favorable, because it's kind of like here with the Pelican, your karmic debts have been paid is what's coming through. And if not, that might be something that you are going to be going through. It's like some sort of new karmic contract, and I'm using the word karmic in terms of just like energy, right? It's not a negative or positive thing. It's kind of just like karma always comes back around, right? So the best thing to do is always put out your best intentions, your best energy, that kind of thing, and know that all of that energy will return back to you. So there could be something about that that's important. But it kind of feels like there's this energy of like the dice have been thrown. How are they going to land? Okay, group 2. I'm going to end it there. If this reading resonated with you, please subscribe, like, or leave a comment down below. If you're interested in a personal reading, you can find my website in the description box. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.